We are back. Twins, Senators baseball, or Senators Twins baseball, past, present, and future. I'm Ralph Tyko with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. We're all in the booth, four of us. George Case III, Ronnie Rabinovitz, and Chad Rubin. Happy to have you guys, and we're going to have a terrific show.
Great.
Thank you.
Good to talk to you, Ralph.
Good. We're going to center the show basically around the late, great Kirby Puckett. One of the most misunderstood stories in sports. I met Kirby Puckett when I was the Tops rep in the California League back in, I think it was 1984. It was the year that the USFL had a championship game. I think it was their first championship game. And I remember that because Kirby Puckett was playing with the Visalia Oaks in the California League. And he was on the road when I caught up with him. And he had already signed his contract, his Tops contract, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if I was the one that signed him originally, but I interacted with him as a first-year major league player or minor league player, professional player. And he was a delight. He was everything in the clubhouse revolved around him. He was just, it was like he was one of those guys that just brought a good time to baseball. There was always a smile on his face, and I have happy memories of our interaction, and it was sure fun to watch him come up and have a Hall of Fame career, cut short, of course, by the tragedy of, I don't know when it was discovered that he had glaucoma. I'm going to pass the baton. Chad Rubin, maybe you can fill us in on something that I'm unclear about.
Well, he got glaucoma in spring training of 1996, which was, he was coming off a year where he hit 315. I mean, so it wasn't like his career was diving down. He had been hit in the face the year before by, I believe it was Dennis Martinez by accident, a ball that ran in and hit him in the face. And there's never been a clear idea of whether or not that affected his eyesight or not. But it knocked him out for the last about 25 games of that year. I agree with you. I think he's one of the most misunderstood Hall of Famers there could ever be. He does not get the credit for how great he really was. I saw him when he first came up to the Twins on July 4th of 1984. He had been up for maybe 3-4 weeks. And you knew right away he was a ball player. He always had a smile on his face. He always ran hard. I love that. Oh, I mean, he was a throwback.
Yep.
He
was fun in the clubhouse. Everybody loves him, right?
Yeah, I mean, the teammates loved him. The press loved him. The fans loved him of all ages. I mean, he had the perfect name, Kirby. I mean, he was Kirby. And you never said Kirby Puckett. You just said Kirby.
Right.
Yeah.
So true.
I always thought every time I heard his name, and to this day, I always want to say, and the Union Gap. If you remember that musical group from way back. George, your thoughts?
Well, I was interested to hear Chad say about his impression of Kirby Puckett being a throwback, because that's the way I envisioned him, and I certainly didn't know Kirby, but I followed his career in the fact that I was interested in the Twins, and he was such a great player. and he was a throwback because he did love the game, and he played, I think, 12 years, all within the Minnesota Twins organization, which is rare in itself. The fact that most
Today's
players
day and
today
age.
with free agency,
Right,
they move around
exactly.
from team to team. Kirby was always there, and he always did have a smile on his face. A 12-year career, Hall of Fame. I don't know how many years he led the league in hitting and hits.
5.
And, lifetime batting average of 318. World Series. So, he was just a great player and a throwback player. Joining, other Hall of Famers from Minnesota, Harmon Killebrew and Rod Carew, and then Tony Oliva, who I think certainly should be in there someday. But
Absolutely.
I always had the impression of Kirby Puckett as just a great player and a wonderful ambassador for baseball who really enjoyed playing the game.
Right.
Well, it's interesting that he made the Hall of Fame with a career that did parallel Tony Oliva's in a lot of respects.
Right.
Both
Right.
put up great numbers, and both careers cut short by injuries injuries, or in this case, glaucoma. And it does make sense that a pitched ball in your face could have a cause and effect on circulation or whatever in your
Sure.
eye.
No question about it.
Yeah, and glaucoma itself is so subjective of a term almost. It's all different extents. This could have been something that was caused by it, and they just might have named it glaucoma for with no other connection to, because athletic injuries aren't something that you can chronicleize easily. Fewer and all of that. So,
and he was Ralph. He was the Twins' all-time career leader in hits, runs, doubles, and total bases. Unbelievable. He really was something. And
I wanted to ask
it was
Ronnie and Chad. I'm curious. I don't know. Was the glaucoma and his illness diagnosed after he retired or prior to his retirement?
That's what forced him to retire. He came he came to spring training in '96, expecting to have a big year, and he was having trouble seeing. And it just got worse and worse, and that's when they sent him to a specialist, and he never played ever again. Never played
No. Yeah, that's right. He was 36 when he was forced to retire.
Yeah, and then Kirby passed away, and then 10 years later or something, a hypertension or a stroke or something?
2006.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, 2006. Yeah. And his after playing days, we can all be honest about it, were not very good.
No. He gained a lot of weight.
It was the point where he had to even move away to Arizona because of the things that were happening here.
Right. Unfortunately, he had some incidences that were not good. But you know what? He was still loved.
Abuse charges, if I'm not mistaken.
He was still loved by everybody. He was a hero. He was a hero to the Twins.
In the Twins organization, was he in public relations? Did he coach at all after retiring?
They gave him a promotions job, a vice president of promotions or something like that. And he'd be out and about in public. You'd see him everywhere.
Yeah. What a nice man.
I can only imagine the frustration of losing your career, your livelihood.
Yeah.
At an early, all ball players lose their livelihood at an early age, but just as an added caveat, the surprise of he may not have been in his prime, but like you said, Chad, he wasn't losing it. He hit 315 the year before. That might have been Ronnie who pointed that out. It's got to be difficult, and I'm sure that contributed to some of his demons
Without a doubt.
Later
Without a doubt. But I got to tell you,
he was so frustrated.
What made him so special was how he fit. He was a kid from the inner city of Chicago. You'd never known it. He was a kid who, he was just happy-go-lucky, happy to be a baseball player. He just loved it. He loved the fans. He loved his teammates. I mean, he just, there was something different about him. And then when he got up to the plate, he was not an orthodox hitter. He was so unorthodox, it was crazy. He had hit balls in his eyes, down by his feet. He was just different, and it was so much fun to grow up with that.
Yeah, he reminded me.
He was always a little, he was always a little chunky, but he was
right. He reminded me of Yogi Berra a lot, going after these bad balls, and his body shape. He was still very fast.
Oh yes, absolutely. Absolutely. He was phenomenal. Now, in 1966, in the Grapefruit League in spring training, he was batting .344. And then on March 28th, he woke up without vision in his right eye, just like that. And he ended up having 3 surgeries, and they could not really restore the vision. He went on the DL for the first time ever in his career. Amazing. He was just an amazing guy. But it just came on that fast. I mean, he woke up.
I'm curious, Ronnie and Chad, when you're talking about the sudden onset of the glaucoma, was there any indication before that when it happened? And the reason I'm asking, because going back to my dad's era with Lou Gehrig, I mean, that was almost an overnight thing. I mean, the players couldn't understand what was happening to Lou, and Lou couldn't understand what was happening to himself. So I'm really curious as to Kirby, how he handled and whether or not he really realized something was wrong or whether it just happened overnight.
I think it just happened overnight. Because he was batting he was batting .344 in spring training. And then on March 28th, he woke up and had no vision in his right eye. So it just came on suddenly.
And
before that, he was doing great.
Yeah.
Really
you mentioned something, Lou Gehrig. Did your dad know Lou Gehrig? Did he actually play?
Yeah, he did. My dad and Lou were quite friendly, as a matter of fact, and they did play against one another. And then my father was on the field the day that Lou Gehrig was honored at Yankee Stadium, July 4th of 39.
Wow.
And
my mother was in the
speech?
stands that day of that
Yeah,
game.
I've got the photograph in my office, and my dad was right behind Lou, and when Lou gave his farewell speech, and then I was told by a SABR member, I don't know whether it's true or not, and it obviously didn't have any significance at the time, but on April 30th of 39, the last game that Lou Gehrig played in the major leagues at Yankee Stadium, my dad was playing center field for Washington, and Lou hit a pop-up to center field. My dad caught it, and that was the last ball that Lou Gehrig hit in his major league career.
Wow.
Incredible.
Holy
Incredible.
Toledo.
Unbelievable. What type of guy did he say he
Your
was?
dad knew him well. Can you tell me anything that we may not know about Lou Gehrig?
Well, and that's why I was sort of asking about Kirby Puckett, Ralph and Ron and Chad, because the players just could not understand what was happening to Lou Gehrig. He was such a big, strong, burly, tremendous hitter, great coordination, and then almost overnight it all disappeared, and no one could figure it out. Lou, first of all, thought it was his age, but then, he wasn't that old. And it was almost.
How old was he, George?
I think he was like 37, 38. And then 2 years.
He might have been younger than that, George. I think he might have been about 34.
Well, whatever it was, but it could be, Ralph, but he retired, in 1939, and then he was given that honor on July 4th of 39, and 2 years later, because of the onset of ALS, Lou Gehrig passed away.
Huh.
Goodness. Did they know what ALS was back then?
Not really. They really didn't. He went to Mayo Clinic, and they diagnosed it, and they came up with a diagnosis of ALS, but nobody had even heard about it, didn't know what it was. And then, today, ALS is a major factor in today with many people. Matter of fact, Catfish Hunter died of ALS. So, it is a horrible disease, attacks young, vibrant people many times, and it's just a debilitating injury and an illness that no cure is yet to be found.
Yeah, terrible.
With all the money, with all the attention that Lou Gehrig brought to it, and the money that was raised for research, it remains a mystery to medical science. And
it does, and people don't, they don't necessarily say ALS. They refer to it as Lou Gehrig's disease. Right,
exactly. One of the things I read about Lou Gehrig, or the story of his demise, was that his doctors and his wife never let him know that his chances of recovery were nil. I don't even know if they knew it, because the disease being, previously undiagnosed with folks, but that kept his spirits up to the end. And I don't think he knew he wasn't going to recover. He got a great job in New York City, the parole board, or
yes. He was the commissioner of he was the head of the parole board in New York City. That was an honor given to him by Mayor LaGuardia. And, Lou worked at it for about a year or so, and then he had to resign that position when, his illness just he had no muscular control. It was just a terrible illness. And yet, Lou stayed very, very positive. I've seen copies of letters that he wrote to fans, the doctors, and people that knew him, saying that, hey, I'm gonna beat this thing. We're working on it, and I'm taking the special vitamins, and I'm taking care of myself and following doctor's orders, and I'm going to get better. And
right.
I think you're right, Ralph. I think the doctors and his wife Eleanor, I think they did keep it from him because it was such a horrible illness, and no one really knew what the outcome was going to be.
Right. George, how did your dad get to know Lou Gehrig? I mean, when I say
think
that,
playing against him.
Your dad knew Lou Gehrig.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
I think playing against him, Ralph and Ronnie and Chad, the fact that Lou Gehrig was a first baseman and my dad was a leadoff hitter for the Senators, so they spent some time together at first base. And one thing, and I know that we want to talk about Kirby Puckett, but the one thing that my dad had, one of my first memories, he showed me his leg, and he called it his Lou Gehrig scar. And when my dad was leading off at first base, and a throw came over to Gehrig, and Lou jumped up to get it. It was a high throw. My dad slid back into the bag, and Lou came down on my dad with his spikes and cut him. And, obviously totally not unintentional, but that scar was there, and they had to, I guess, put a couple stitches in it, and my dad carried that scar with him all his life.
Oh,
unbelievable!
This is off the top of my head, and I'm going to turn it to you. I'm going to turn it to Chad and Ronnie to talk about the twins. George, was your dad in any rhubarbs, any famous fights, or did they even have rhubarbs before Billy Martin and Clint Court?
Yeah, well, he did. My dad was very mild-mannered, but I do have a photograph of, I think it was probably in '44, maybe when the Browns won the pennant, but Nelson Potter was a pitcher for the Browns, and apparently he threw at my dad or something, so the next pitch, my father laid a bunt down along the first baseline, and Potter ran over to get it, and my father, ran over him, and they got into a fist fight. And so That's the only time I ever saw my dad was hot-headed as far as playing. He used to get on umpires and stuff, but as far as other players, I never saw him in any kind of a dispute other than that one time with Nelson Potter.
Well, maybe he got it all the frustrations out on Nelson Potter of a career. He probably wanted to take it out on somebody.
Well, you know, when you're playing, I mean, some guys have a short fuse, what they call a short fuse, and other guys are quiet. My dad was quiet, and he loved to play the game and got along with the players. So that was the only time that I knew about. There might have been others, but that happened to be captured in a photograph that somebody sent me. It said, "Hey, here's your father taking a poke at Nelson Potter."
Good that you have that. Let's go at it for the Twins. I think this has been a fascinating year for them.
Fascinating year. Fascinating year.
Ronnie, Chad.
Nobody figured this. Nobody figured this. They're only a game and a half out.
That's right. I was just going to say the Twins are hanging in there, Ronnie and Chad.
They really are.
They're doing a good job. I thought they would have faded long before now, but they've stayed right with her.
What's amazing is they got blown out Friday night, and you're thinking Houston's going to just go be all on top of them all weekend, and they come back last night and play unbelievable and win the game.
And beat them, yeah. And Houston's got a hell of a team.
They don't take it. It's a day by day thing for them this year, and they don't get into slumps. And they've also been very well managed by Paul Molitor.
I think so too.
Much better manager this year.
Yeah, I think so too.
How do you, when you say he's a much better manager, did he acknowledge mistakes last year? Did he?
Well, he changed most of
learning
his
curve.
Staff. Well, he changed most of his staff after last year, and more importantly, I think he's starting to realize, people forget these guys who are Hall of Famers. They see the game in a different way, and one of the ways he's changed is guys who get into even a mini slump, he pulls them out for a day or two, and gets their head right, and then they come back and they're ready to play again. When you're a Hall of Famer like he was, he just wanted to be out there every day. He's taken a very young team. I mean, they have so many kids under the age of 25. It's scary, and he's molded them into a team. And their pitching is awful. I mean, just absolutely awful. And yet, the other night in Houston, they had an inning where they had one hit and 6 walks in the inning, and they scored 4 runs. I mean, who does that?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Is there pitching help coming up in the farm system?
Well, I'm sorry, repeat that?
I said, is there pitching coming up in the farm system?
No, that is the one problem. The Twins have been historically terrible at bringing pitchers up. They really don't have much young pitching talent. They have a lot of hitters, but they do not have a lot of pitching. And like I said, it's a historical thing. Name me the last 5 great pitchers that they have developed in their farm system, and there aren't many.
The one other question I want to ask you, are they heavily involved in the Latin scouting in the Dominican, Puerto Rico?
Yeah,
what have you?
Very heavy. It really started with Sanel, but they have put together an academy in the Dominican Republic. There was talk of doing one in Venezuela until the political problems got so bad there that they couldn't do it. But yes, they are starting to scout the world, just like everyone else is doing.
I think the general manager and his assistant, those 2 guys are great. I think they got good stock. One came from Texas, the other from Cleveland. So I think they're young kids, and they're not afraid to make any moves. And I have a feeling there might be some trades before the July deadline. But
it's
who knows?
nice that they're going to trade to get for this year. In other words, they're not trading off for prospects. I think they're going to be going for it for this year.
Here's the thing. They have a lot of good young prospects that are hitters. They could probably trade 2 or 3 of them without a problem and have guys just move up in their system. It's pitching. They just don't have any, and that's what they're looking for.
Hey, Chad, I'm curious about their pitching.
Some prospects.
I'm curious about their pitching staff. Are they having trouble with starters and relievers, or is it a problem with relievers? I mean, baseball has changed so much. It used to be you had a starter and he was expected to go 9 innings, and that was it. Today they have a starting pitcher who goes 6 and a middle reliever and a closer and that kind of thing. Where is the pitching problems?
They only have 2 top-of-the-line starters right now. Obviously, Rubin Santana, who was in the All-Star game, and he pitched a beautiful game last night. And then the rookie Barrios, who has top-end stuff. I mean, this kid's one of the top prospects in baseball, and he's looked at this year, but he's still a rookie, and he still has his hiccups. After that, their pitching staff is not very good. And if those starters don't make it into the 6th inning, watch out, because if those guys have...
And their bullpen isn't good either.
Their bullpen's awful.
Yeah, they are.
Probably worn down by the fact that the pitchers are not going into the 6th, 7th inning.
Right.
Well,
almost which came first, the chicken or the egg. I want to talk injuries. Are you guys, the Twins, hit with injuries as much as, I'm sure not as much as my Mets, for instance, who every other day... not as bad, but we can branch out and talk about injuries, pitching injuries, with the Twins in particular, but all over baseball. Do you guys, I'll start with George, any idea at all, and nobody really knows for sure, what's your theory on this, George? Overworked, underworked, coddled, going to hit... putting the exertion on to hit 100 miles an hour every pitch, young kids going on traveling teams, playing 80 games a year before they're 14 years old. What do you think?
Ralph, and Ronnie and Chad, there's a lot of disagreement on that. Certain managers, players, scouts, executives, they think that the starting pitcher today, if he goes 6 innings, that's a quality start. The arm problems and things that happen, I really don't know. My opinion is that I think a pitcher strengthens his arm by pitching. And I know Nolan Ryan feels that way. And then if you look in the old days, when you guys had Walter Johnson and Lefty Grove and Warren Spahn and those great Hall of Fame pitchers, they pitched and they threw 300 innings a season. Today, and the complete games. I think I read a statistic. Walter Johnson at one time had 500 and some complete games in his career. CC Sabathia today with the Yankees has 37 complete games in his career. So, and then I read about, players having Tommy John surgery before they even need it. And kids, young kids having it. I mean, to me, it's wrong. And, I'm not a doctor. I don't have the medical background, but in my opinion, and from playing the game myself and being around people who played the game, when you were a pitcher, you pitched, you threw. Now, they talk about the 100-mile-an-hour velocity. Well, Walter Johnson and Bob Feller, they were throwing 100 miles an hour too. So, my opinion is that, that's an argument that you can make, but, it might be that they're overusing their arm, what Ralph's talking about, all these travel teams and young kids. But the other thing I see with young kids, and I know when my dad was teaching me about pitching, he always told me from a very early age, do not throw curveballs. And I never did. I never threw a curveball until I was in college. So I think today the kids with Little League, they're starting, and you talk about an 11, 12-year-old kid throwing a breaking ball, his arm eventually is going to go on him.
Absolutely, it is. Absolutely. I know my grandson. He's 9, and they're only allowed to pitch 2 innings, and they watch him real close, no matter what. And if there's 3 games in a weekend, he might pitch 1 inning in one game and maybe 2 innings in another game, and then nothing in the 3rd game.
Does
so
he
kind of
play
watching
position? Does he play positions as well?
Yes, he does. Yeah.
Okay.
He plays shortstop or third base or something.
Can I say something on what the part of the problem is at baseball? Take Clayton Kershaw, and Ronnie will attest to this. The guy pitched last Sunday, then had the whole week off for the All-Star break, and yet he still hasn't pitched since the All-Star break. He's the best pitcher in baseball. Why did he throw Friday or Saturday night?
Who is this? Who?
Kershaw.
Oh, Kershaw. Well,
if he's the best pitcher in baseball, what are they babying him for?
Well, he may have a muscle pull or something going that we don't know about.
That we don't know about, right? It could be.
Yeah, but
I don't know.
That goes back to the 40s and 50s where guys were pitching no matter what.
I know.
Now because
but today they baby him.
Yeah, because he makes $35 million.
Yeah. He's
well,
some pitcher. Unbelievable.
Yeah, some pitcher. They're talking about him being
Jesus
as good
Christ.
as Koufax.
Yeah.
Historically, he'll go down. As
probably better. Yeah.
I do have a question for you guys a history question for you guys. What was guys like Feller and Whitey Ford, what were the kind of money those guys were making in their day?
You would want to know.
Yeah, but it still had to be a lot of money in those days.
Those guys were probably making at most, probably $100,000 at most. I know that Joe DiMaggio and Ted Williams during their careers, and they're an everyday ball player, they were making $100,000, and probably Ford and I know Walter Johnson was obviously making a lot less, but Ford and Warren Spahn and Marichal and those great pitchers, Gibson. I mean, I'm certain that their contracts were nowhere near what they're making today on a per game basis, for crying out loud.
No, but
Jackie Robinson, I think his highest salary was $50,000.
Right.
Whose was?
Jackie Robinson.
But compared to everybody else in that day, was that a lot of money?
I suppose.
Oh yeah, it was.
It was a lot. It was a lot of money. I want to just jump in here from my dad's point of view and the players that he played against. It was a lot of money, compared to the general public, but it was still within the realm of the fact that the players were still part of the game. The fans they enjoyed one another. I mean, today the salaries are so astronomical that a fan cannot even relate to the kind of money that these players are making. And the fact that those players are going to be paid, they're going to be paid a multi-year contract, wherein the players during my dad's career and before and even after for quite a few years, their contracts were based upon their performance of the year before. They signed one-year contracts.
Wow.
Did your father have a second job in the off-season?
Most all of them did, yes. They did. They had to.
Yeah. He had liquor stores.
I want to ask you, George, was your dad big in the early union days? Was he in on that? I know fellows like Feller and Robin Roberts were union activists. If that was the term, there wasn't even.
Well, the thing about back then, and my dad was very fortunate. The players' union came in, and when they made it retroactive on the pension, they made it retroactive to 1946. My dad retired in 47, so he was covered by the pension plan. But what a lot of people do not realize that if a player had retired in 1945 or before, they absolutely received not $1 in pension.
Isn't that terrible? Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Let me tell you a little story about how it is today. Because today, the kid that got hurt in the first inning, Fowler, with the Yankees, ran into the fence, ran into a little piece of equipment out there, destroyed his knee, first inning of the game. First inning of his first major league game. A side note to that is that any player coming up who is like him in one game, in one inning, gets free health insurance for the rest of his life.
For the rest of life, yeah. That's a huge thing.
The strongest union in the country.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's an amazing benefit if that's what it is. That's incredible.
Yeah. It's an award too. You have to realize how many players in the minors, spend 5-6 years, never reach the majors.
Right.
It's almost bait. It's almost a hook where, hang in there, kid. All you got to do is get an appearance type thing.
Right.
But I was using it as an example of how the pendulum has turned to the point where minimum salary, a young kid comes up, makes $535,000 a year, minimum salary. And I remember it was like $6 in the 50s and 60s when I grew up.
Right.
When I became aware of it, of salary. And isn't it funny that we baseball lovers who fell in love with it because it was a game and it wasn't business, we didn't think of it as business, so much attention is paid to money disproportionately to the way it used to be. George, do you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I'll tell a quick story. Someone, and I might have even mentioned this before, somebody had talked to Joe DiMaggio, after he retired. And Joe retired, in 1951, I believe, so he was a young man. But
yes.
When they were talking to him about, the salaries, and this was, quite a few years ago, but they said to Joe, what do you think that you'd be making today? And if you had negotiation with the owner of the Yankees, and he'd say, well, I'd walk into the room and say, how you doing there, partner?
Yeah.
That's absolutely right. But the owners would have so many partners.
Right.
But that's a great line. That's a great line.
The
DiMaggio story. We talked about Ted Williams, George. A DiMaggio story.
Right.
Did your dad know him real well?
Oh yeah, my dad. My dad was fortunate because he knew Ted Williams very well. Played left field the first game that Lou Boudreau put on the Williams shift. My dad was in left field at Fenway Park. Joe DiMaggio and my father were very good friends. They were on a couple All-Star teams together. 1939 was when they were together in the All-Star game. So, my dad was fortunate because he knew a lot of the great players and played against them and knew them very well. And consequently, for me, it was wonderful growing up because I heard all the stories and knew that my dad, was talking to them and knew them personally. So it was quite an experience for me as a youngster.
Did your dad go off to war?
No, he did not, Chad. My dad was 4F. He was declared 4F by the draft board, so he was allowed to keep playing. But the stipulation was that any ball player who was declared 4F during World War II would have to work in a defense industry plant. So in the off season, my dad worked for a Grumman, I think it was a Grumman factory, building bombers for the war effort. That was his job in the off season.
Interesting.
Well, was he mechanically inclined? Or did they teach him
Well, I would say this. I don't think my dad was mechanically inclined. He was athletically inclined, but I think on the
okay. Well, that he
I think when
no doubt
I think
about
when
that.
he was building bombers, he was on a shift or whatever it was. Maybe he had to put a screw in or something. He could do that, but I don't think he was. I know he wasn't technically inclined because I know that I'm not. And I used to laugh. I'd say, Pop, I'm like you as an athlete, but you and I we can't hammer a nail straight.
I can't either. I can't either.
George, before I turn it over to these guys, these youngins who are gonna
youngins, thank you very much.
I want to ask you. We never talked about your athletic career. I know you played basketball at Rutgers, and I know you played baseball as well. If you had to scout yourself, and you've seen a lot of ball, you're from a family of athletes, how far did you go? Did you go?
Well, I could have gone further if I wanted to, but when I came out of college, I had two youngsters, and my dad said to me, he said, you could play baseball, but you'd be knocking around the minor leagues. I'm not sure I had the talent to make it all the way to the top, but with two youngsters, it made a big difference. So, the fact is that you're playing minor league baseball, you're going to be in a lot of different cities, a lot of different years before you make it to the major leagues, if you make it at all. Scouting report on me, I was a good athlete, but I couldn't hit a curveball. I could hit a fastball. I was a low ball hitter. I could hit a low fastball, but if they started throwing curves at me, I was going to sit down. So that I could run and I could throw, and I was a pitcher and a first baseman at a good size. But when it came to all the skills you need to be a ball player, I don't think that I had the requisite skill of being able to hit a curveball the way most players today have to do that. You can find a lot of players they can hit a fastball, but the curveball is going to give them trouble.
George, you mentioned that you pitched. What was your experience on the hill?
Well, pitching, I pitched from a very early age. I started when I was probably 11 years old in Little League, and that's what I said about my dad. He would always talk. We'd have catches in our backyard and throw, and he'd say, "I do not want you throwing curveballs." So I relied on a fastball. I was a big kid, and I could throw hard. I didn't have the best control. My dad used to laugh at me. He said, "They're bailing out on you because they're not sure where the ball is." I said, "Pop, I don't know where it's going either, to tell you the truth."
His dad didn't push you more than was normal. He wasn't one of those drive you to the wall kind of dads.
Never. He never did. He used to tell me, he said, "Georgie, I love you whether you play, ever pick up a ball, you're my son." And I always said that to him with my kids. They all were athletes and they were good, but I never pushed them. My dad never pushed me. He would say to me, whenever you want help or if you want to do something, and have a question, ask me. And that was how he pushed me. I'd have to ask him, and then he'd tell me. But if we were having a catch in the backyard and I was throwing and I did, what's that?
Did you have siblings growing up?
Well, I had a sister. I have a sister who's 16 years younger than me, so we were two only children. So my dad, my sister was a very good swimmer. She was a good athlete, but had no interest really. She does today with the history of it, but she was not a player. But I played, and the fact that I played in an area where my dad grew up, so a lot of the same people and coaches and players, knew my name because my name was the same as my dad. So I think I told a story about one time when I was 11 years old, I'm playing Little League, and some fan is hollering at me, Case, you'll never be as good as your old man. And my dad was incensed. He told me, he said, "I'm never going to come to another game." So you don't need to hear that.
Right.
That goes down as one of the most terrible things I've heard from parents.
Absolutely.
The whole league experience and humanity.
It can be brutal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Parents.
You're in Little League with your grandson now, Ronnie. Have things changed at all? Do they make an attempt to keep that craziness at a little league?
They do, but some of the parents are really bad. I mean, they're pushing their kids, or they're hollering at the umpires. I mean, just doing things that are not right.
Right.
My friend Cindy James was telling me a story. She coaches Little League football, flag football, and there was a parent that came up to her and just hated the fact that she was a woman, that she was coaching football. These are kids. These are little kids. I mean, they're 7, 8, 9 years old. And he actually.
It's like is it like Pop Warner?
Yeah, I mean, it was like like it's the flag football. It's not tackle. And
okay.
So her ex-husband was there. He's one of the coaches, and this guy that was complaining took a slug at this guy, the ex-husband, and knocked a tooth out. I mean, or chipped a tooth. I mean, it's crazy. Some of these people are nuts. And
Ronnie, I agree with you, Ronnie. I've heard those horror stories. I mean, to me, baseball, football, basketball is supposed to be fun, and
fun.
The parents should stay out of it, and
they ruin
coaches,
it. They ruin it. You're right.
They do. And
they do.
To me, when I was a kid, we would play, and I'm sure you did too, and Ralph and Chad. You go outside and you play baseball because it's fun. All of a sudden now you've got coaches, you've got travel teams, you got uniforms, and during the day in the summertime, the ball fields are empty if there's not a practice or a game going on.
Right, exactly. And I mean, we had games every day. I mean, they weren't scheduled games. There wasn't, but we were playing all the time from morning to night.
It was called Sandlot ball. It wasn't organized.
We used to play 500. We used to play different things.
Choose them up. You choose them
up.
We didn't with the bat.
We didn't have bases. I mean, you could go in a field and you could, put something down for a base.
Mark it out, right?
Yeah, that's right.
What you did.
Where I grew up
in the city,
at least you guys had places to play. We were on concrete. We were playing artificial stickball and swatto.
But it's different today.
But we played, and we had fun, and that's what athletics was for.
That's what it should be fun. You're learning a game. These kids are learning a game.
And you're burning energy, and you're gaining confidence, and if
you're learning how to lose.
If you played on any level, you walk down the street a little differently. You try to.
Exactly.
I'm 71. When I walk, I try not to look like an old man walking. Try to look like a guy going to the tennis court.
Exactly. Right.
Off to play, and I think that's what keeps one young. And
absolutely.
So there you go.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, these kids got to learn. They're learning, and they should have fun.
Yeah.
And they're learning teamwork. I mean, that's so important, even in later life. It's to work as a team. You got to work together. Most people,
absolutely,
whatever they're employed in, they work with other associates, and they work on teams. And I mean, so even if they don't pursue a career in sports, they're learning teamwork, and it's fun. And they learn how to lose, and they learn how to win.
Well, you know what? That's very important. What you just said about learning how to lose, because if you're an athlete in any sport, you're going to lose, and you have to learn how to lose. Hey, winning is great, but you're never going to win every time. It's just not going to happen.
No, you're not.
And when you look at Major League Baseball today, and you look at the Twins. I mean, they're having a good year, but how many games have they lost already this year? And will probably lose. They might win. Say if they win 100. That means they're going to lose 62. So,
sure, exactly. And last year they lost over 100.
Right.
So I mean, it's a big turnaround. So if they lost every game the rest of the year, they'd be a success today.
Right.
Because of where they came. They came a long ways.
And you know what? We're talking about players having fun and all that. And getting back to Kirby Puckett, I bet when he was a youngster, he played because he was having fun. And just like when he's in the major leagues. Hey, he's having fun playing in the major leagues. A great player like Ernie Banks, I'll never forget. Ernie Banks was always quoted as saying, "Hey, it's a beautiful day. Let's play two." That was his
Right,
mentality.
exactly. That's right.
And that was Puckett's hero.
He had fun. Yeah. He had fun.
Oh, was that right? That's interesting.
Yeah.
That doesn't surprise me at all. Yeah.
And he had fun, and he made it fun in the clubhouse.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. Ernie Banks, when he said, let's play two, he was from an era when, George will tell you, there were 23 doubleheaders played.
Yeah. Sure.
Sunday doubleheaders was the norm. It wasn't,
it was the norm.
Hey, how much time are we spending at the ballpark? Can we cut back the thing? We don't have automatic walks now. You can't, where that takes away from it. All these things that people are concerned with, saving a few seconds. You're at the ballpark. Enjoy it. It doesn't have, it's not the pace of basketball.
But there's one problem. Games today last 3.5, 4 hours. They never lasted more than 2 hours and 15, 2.5 hours at the very most.
Right.
I mean,
That's
it's
true.
It used to be quick in, out, boom. It was fun. You liked doubleheaders then. But could you sit through two today where they're 3.5, 4 hours long each? Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I know for a
you're
fact.
You're not going to have the opportunity to do that very often at all.
And when you look at box scores and you look at time of games, when in an earlier era, a lot of games were under 2 hours. So you could have a doubleheader. You could have a doubleheader that's played in 4 hours or 4.5 hours. With a doubleheader, where today you have a single game going 4.5 hours.
Yeah, right. It's well over 3 hours. Well over 3 hours.
Right.
All pitching changers and all that. An extra hit, yeah.
Hey, Chad, just because we're up against it time-wise, give me an idea what's coming up for the Twins this week, anything we should look for, anything that stands out to you.
Yeah, we get to see Aaron Judge.
Oh, yes. Yes. Wow.
And I think that's going to be exciting. The Yankees are young like the Twins. Just because they started so well and they're the Yankees, everyone jumps on board. But I think they'll be fine against the Yankees. Then they get a little brief. They get to play Detroit, so that should help them. So it should be, it could be a good week for them.
I hope so.
Aaron Judge, could he be
the
next Ruth, or could he flame out? Could he be Joe Charbonneau?
I hate when we give rookies these big, huge, he's going to be
this guy. Puts a lot of pressure on him.
Yeah, let's see what he does. He's been very impressive, and he seems to have a good demeanor. I saw the home run contest. He seems to be just a good guy.
Yeah.
Right.
By all accounts.
But you know what? Just let the guy play, and let's see how it turns out. Maybe he's the next.
There's so many.
Maybe
so many good young players coming up. It's just amazing. Like Judge, and there's so many good young players that are coming up, and that they're really good. Look at the Dodgers with Cody Bellinger, and Chris Taylor, second baseman, and Seager is a shortstop in second year. They're doing they're going crazy right now. They're playing.
We haven't even talked about the Dodgers, so you must be really happy, Ronnie. They're running away with the National League.
Oh my God, I just love it. I watch every game. I'm enjoying it.
Now there's
63 wins. 63 wins and 29 losses.
That's an organization that has lots of young talent.
Lots of young talent. Yeah, in the minor league system.
Yeah.
Did you guys really find yourself, like I did, jonesing ball during the All-Star break? Like, it was almost like, wow, there's something missing.
Yeah.
It was. I was like in withdrawal. Because it was a whole week.
I'm glad it's back, and I'm glad the four of us will be back next week, and we'll make it fun, and that's what we do.
Great.
And
we have a great time.
I want to thank the three of you for doing this. It really adds to my day.
Thank you for having me.
We thank you.
Hey, thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
good
George.
to talk to you.
Yeah.
Thank you, well, everybody, and thank you for listening out there. hang in there and keep on keeping on.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Bye.